now 5:02. I will call the boardroom to order. Call the meeting to order of the WISD Board of Trustees. Please let the record show that all 7 trustees are present. This meeting has been duly called, and the notice of the meeting is duly posted for time and manner required by law. First item on our agenda will be our open forum. I do not believe we have anyone signed up to speak at this point. So we will move right into item number 3, which is a discussion related to possible changes to the 2020-2021 academic calendar. Who's first tonight?
That would be me.
Okay.
Okay.
And board, I'll remind you when you speak, make sure your microphones are on. I know we have a significant following online tonight.
Yes. We were very unfortunate that we were hit with the COVID virus. But on the other hand, it was very unfortunate that the COVID hit. We were very fortunate, though, that TEA said when it sent everyone home that it was going to continue. There's going to be a formula that Mr. Calden's going to talk about, that they would continue to fund the school. They would give us attendance waivers, meaning that even though the students aren't there, they would pay us as if the students were, so we could pay our staff, so we can continue to have school. That's what they did in the spring. They have made it abundantly clear that will not happen again, that we need to look at our calendar for next year, and you're going to have several presentations from that calendar, that we need to look at our calendar and decide, do we want to take a chance and not change the calendar and not build in any days, which would mean if we are wrong and we are closed down, we will have to make up the minutes on a Saturday, during a previously scheduled break, or in the summer, okay? Or we could modify our calendar now. Now, for everyone who's here, the board has made it very clear it is not going to make a decision tonight because it wants to hear input from administrative staff, but more importantly, it wants online surveys. It wants, the board wants principals meeting with their staff. The board wants a wide array of input from a variety of sources before it makes its decision. And I thank the board for that, because there's nothing we like doing less than changing a school calendar we have already set. Everything is planned. We don't plan our calendar in July and August. We plan our calendar starting in April and May. We want to do staff development. When are the kids coming back? What is it that the teachers need? So to redo a calendar is something that we really try to avoid. We may not be changing this calendar based on the input. We may be changing the calendar a lot. So what we're going to present is a lot of information to the board. Let the board ask questions, and then we'll talk about the kind of schedule we might want to have for when we do need a decision. So we've got Dr. Averett, the Executive Director over Secondary Education. We've got Ms. Lisa Mott, the Executive Director over Elementary Education, and our CFO, Mr. Ryan Calden. And I believe Mr. Calden is going to start by talking about how that attendance waiver was set.
Thank you, Dr. Kane. Don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but want to go back just a little bit, just to make sure we're all on the same page. Talking about state funding. So state funding is a two-edged component. It's ADA and it's minutes. And a couple of years ago, state law changed from 180 days of instruction to 75,600 minutes of instruction. So with that 75,600 minutes, really the only requirements are you cannot finish before a certain day, and I believe that's May 15th. Districts can make your number of school days or number of days of instruction as numerous as you want or as small as you want, but that 75,600 is the equivalent of 7 hours a day for the old 180 days of school. Our District of Innovation status allows us to adjust our schedule, so we can add additional minutes to our calendar. We can start after the state mandated last, or before the state mandated last August every year. We can also finish anytime after May 15th. We don't have to go into June with our regular schedule or 180 days. The minutes requirement is calculated bell to bell, so it's minutes of instruction. It does include lunchtime and it does include recess, but if we had a nap period in there where there's no instruction, that would not be counted. If a district falls short, then our state funding would be reduced. So if we had 71,820 minutes, we would only get about 95% of our state funding, which as a general component, state funding accounts for about 50% of the budget. So it'd make it really hard to pay our staff and to continue paying our bills when we're short of 75,600. On the other side of that, being over 75,600 is of no benefit from a state level. They don't pay you extra for going over 75,600, but it does serve as an insurance policy when we have things like COVID or other events in any given year. We don't have to come back and make up those days in Saturdays, Junes, or the like. The other side of that funding is ADA. ADA is an acronym for average daily attendance. Essentially, every day we look at attendance. So generally you hear districts talk about enrollment. I don't care about enrollment because enrollment doesn't mean anything to me. I look at ADA. ADA is what we're funded on. Different students carry different characteristics and different weights for ADA. You have students in CTE courses that draw additional weight funding. K through 3 students draw additional funding. SPED students draw additional funding. At-risk students draw additional funding. So it's not just as simple as we had 8,600 kids today, we had 9,500 kids today. You have to go into the demographic makeup of those students to determine what your actual ADA is, and that gets into a weighted average ADA. ADA is calculated every day, so you don't get to exclude, if you're over 75,600 minutes, you don't get to take your best 75,600 minutes worth of ADA. It's every day's ADA. I tell you that to say, some days we do well, some days we don't do as well, but all those get counted into your ADA for the entire year. ADA is reviewed every 6 weeks. And then it's really important for our students to be physically present at the official attendance time, because that's when ADA is calculated. If you show up, if attendance is 9:30 and you show up at 9:31, we don't get funding for that day. There are a few exceptions if you went to the doctor, but in general, if you overslept and show up at 9:30, we don't get any funding for you that day. So that's where that official attendance time is really important. It calculates that ADA. As Dr. Kane was saying earlier, the attendance waiver for this year, TA has essentially said, we're going to assume that your kids were present. We want you to make a good faith effort to try to educate them through a distance learning environment, but we're going to assume they were present. But we also are going to look at how your ADA compares year over year. So what they did is they went in and they said the first 6 weeks ADA, everybody essentially was operating school for the first 6 weeks this year. Last year, everybody operated for the entire full year. So they went in and they're going to calculate your ADA for the first 6 weeks last year, compare that to the full year ADA. They're going to take that percentage gap, whatever it may happen to be. For most districts, it's going to be a little bit less. Because you have flu, you have other illnesses that hit in that January, February, December range. It's going to lower your ADA a little bit. Typically, your Aprils and your Mays are a little less sick. You have more kids in attendance, so your ADA generally rises a little bit in those late spring months. So they're going to take that ratio, last year's first 4 to the full year, and apply it to this year to kind of calculate what our full year ADA would have been based off attendance through the first 6 weeks. For us, last year, our gap was 99.98%. We had a difference of 1.5 ADA, a reduction of 1.5 ADA from the first 6 weeks to the entire year. So this year, last meeting, you guys were presented with a budget amendment. Once we got this information from TDA, how they were going to compare it, you got a budget amendment that we have gone through and done the calculation, and we feel pretty good about where our revenue is going to be. So that's where that budget amendment was coming last time, was learning this information from TDA. So in theory, that's how they're going to do it for this year. We should be sitting pretty good with our revenue this year. We couldn't really have asked for a better scenario when it comes to the attendance waiver and calculating state funding for this year.
Okay, so you'll see on this slide, it says TEA at the bottom. This slide was taken straight from a TEA presentation about this issue. It's their stance, and based on what we've been going through, that the 2021 school year, there's likely to be a disruption. A short-term could include a short-term disruption, and that would cause student absenteeism, maybe high student absenteeism. With some students, it might be consistently absent. They're advised to build a calendar that plans for and anticipates these types of absenteeism will help minimize the disruption of our school year, as they believe short-term disruptions are likely, and we should plan them into our calendar. One of the things they also say is that we should adjust or consider how to adjust for learning loss that's as a result of our current situation. The next slide, we'll talk about that, and we all know about what we kind of call the summer slide, where kids leave at a certain level in May, and then when they come back in August or September, and they seem to have kind of gone backwards a little bit because they haven't been in school every day. We know, every educator that's worked with kiddos knows that's a reality. This will be, we believe, more significant. And the fact that we're talking to the board, of course, calendar revisions require significant change management and require board action. So this is another diagram or a graph that TA put together for us to kind of give us a look at what they believe is the impact on student achievement. Starts at 3rd grade, goes all the way to 8th, of course, because that's when we start testing kids. And you can see there, where we had our school closure around the middle of March, kind of where we believe we were. And we see the typical school year where those students continue to learn and thrive up to the last day, and then which is kind of the bold line. And then it tapers off, that summer slide that we see, that typical summer slide, as it goes back down towards September 1st when we get them back. The dotted line is what they would consider the COVID slowdown, and then the small dotted line would be what they would call the COVID slide. If you'll see that difference, the easiest one to see is the 3rd grade, from the typical summer slide to what they believe the COVID slide is, and that is a dramatic loss, okay? And that dramatic loss is not so dramatic at 8th grade and 7th grade, but it is significant at 3rd and 4th and 5th, and we all know how important those foundational years are in all of our education. So that is another reason why a TEA is kind of sounding the alarm as to why we need to be looking at our calendar. It's more significant in math than it is in reading. You can see that for like 3rd grade, it looks like the reading deficit is about half of what math would be over this period, but still significant. So there's some options for calendar redesign that TEA has put out. One is optional summer learning for summer enrichment. So we typically have our typical 180-day calendar, and that provides up to 30 days for some additional instruction. That's called summer additional days, year days, or something like that. I'll get to that in a second, but it has, of course, has an acronym for it. Option 2 is an intersessional calendar. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. That's where we have 180 days spread out over the year with different breaks in between. Not necessarily year-round school, as some people talk about, but they call it intersessional breaks, where you'll go for a while and instead of having a fall break of a week, you'd have 2 weeks. And instead of having a Christmas holiday break for 2 weeks, it'd be 4 weeks. And the last is what is a full year redesign, where it is year-round school. Not so much the intersessional calendar, but a full year school. So here's a sample of what some folks what they're talking about, an intersessional calendar. You can look in that, like we start in August, early August, and we go to November and have a couple of weeks off in November, and then we have a longer break December through January, and then a longer break in March. December through January, probably the height of the cold and flu season that we typically have. We know that's because it's colder outside and we're inside more around each other. In the blue is when all students would attend. The gray is where we'd have breaks. Benefits, again, like I said, in case we had a COVID-19 resurgence, we would have a 4-week break there in the middle of the height of the cold flu season, and then another 3-week break kind of at the end of it there at the February-March area, which is just so happens to be when we had the start of COVID in our area. Remember, we extended spring break. This gives us some flexibility. Here's an example of what an intersessional calendar would look like if, let's say, we had an unexpected school closure in October for 2 weeks. because we had maybe an outbreak or something. We could look at those 4 weeks that we had over the December, January time, and we could basically get those 2 weeks back that we lost in October, and then we wouldn't have to stretch any farther than we already have stretched into June, if this was a calendar that we chose, intersessional calendar. And the number of days worked by teachers doesn't change. It's still 187 days. I'm going to let Mr. Calden talk about this for a little bit, about what the additional funding for elementary.
This is one of the things that was included in House Bill 3, and it starts next year. It actually starts for school years beginning September 1, 2020. The general idea is that districts would have to operate for 180 days and have 75,600 minutes. Those are the two non-negotiables to start with. But beyond that, the state would pay us half-day formula funding for up to 30 additional days of summer school for students enrolled in grades pre-K through 5 only. So it wouldn't hit secondary campuses, it wouldn't hit junior highs. It essentially would be additional days of instruction that the state would be paying us for summer school for those elementary kids. The pros is you've got more kids getting that instruction, and they're not having that summer slide as bad because those additional 30 days. The negatives, this doesn't actually start until the summer of 21. So the funding is not in place for this summer. It starts next summer. It starts September 1, 2020 and beyond.
So what date did you say?
September 1, 2020.
Okay.
So a couple other calendar considerations. One of the things that we've been told, TA's told us, is that for the next few years they are not altering the testing windows. So the testing dates that we know happen, in the spring and of course in December for EOC retest, they're not changing those dates. Okay, like Mr. Calden said earlier, the last day of school cannot be before May 15th. Okay, so that's another thing we have to consider. And then we talked. He just discussed about the additional school year program days. That does not go in effect until September 1st, 2020. All right, I'll turn it over to Ms. Mott.
Okay, before we go into some different options that we can consider as a district, just a couple of things to keep in mind. Our teachers work 187 contract days. Okay, and we have to always remember that student minutes are different from teacher days, and that gets really complicated when they did that a few years ago. So when we talk about all these things, none of the options I'm going to present to you tonight will impact 187 teacher contract days. We don't want to increase them. We don't want to decrease them. They're going to work 187 days. When you first look at some of these options, teachers' reactions are going to be, oh, we've got to work more days. No, okay, so no one's working more than 187 days on teacher contracts. The minutes are what we are really looking at. We want to bank minutes, and as the other presenters have said, 75,600 is our minimum number of student minutes. We are looking in these options of banking in student minutes in case we have one of those disruptions that we've been talking about. So all of these options have to do with banking those minutes, not increasing teacher contract days. So in this year's calendar, we were very fortunate in that we had 10 extra days worth of minutes built in. All right, so we had 80,100 student minutes instead of the 75,600 minimum. That calendar that was designed for the 1920 school year had a lot of extra minutes in it. So when we did the extended spring break, it was not alarming to us because we had plenty of minutes built in. Okay, so we were all right. Now, in the end, it didn't matter because TEA waived all of that. But when that first decision was made to extend spring break, we were good. We didn't need to worry about our students having to come back and make five days up. So that was really good planning in this year's calendar. So then as we move into some options for the 2021 calendar.
Ms. Mott, just to clarify, so Mr. Calden, even though the teachers would be working 187 days, if we did the additional summer days, we would be hiring our own teachers and they would get paid extra.
Yes, ma'am. That would be up to the district to work out some sort of funding mechanism, but it would be in addition to the 187 days.
Thank you.
Okay, so as we look at our 2021 calendar options, we adopted the 2021 calendar. The one that we adopted had 1,600 extra minutes in it. All right, so we had about 3.5 days banked in. So if we had a lot of bad weather, if we had any kind of interruption, a COVID interruption, we could only withstand 3.5 days before we would lose funding. You can add about 2 days to that because we do have 2 bad weather days built in there. Depending on the timing of the interruption, we might be able to get up to about 5.5 days with our current calendar that we have in place. I don't know how long a COVID shutdown would take, but I'm thinking it might be more than 5.5 days. Not sure. Okay, another option is option B up there. We could modify the adopted calendar a little bit by taking 5 professional development days that are currently in the calendar, and those days are August 12th, 13th, 14th, 17th, and 18th. Those are currently 5 professional days for teachers only, no students. They haven't returned yet. We could repurpose those into student instruction days. If we would do that, we could pick up another 2,250 minutes. So you see the math there. I took the 1,600 surplus that we already have in place, plus the repurposed 5 days, and that would bump us up to about 8.5 days that we would have banked. Add 2 bad weather days in there, depending on when it happens, and we start getting a little higher, a little bit safer. One thing to note on this that's really important is that the teacher start date would remain the same at August the 10th. Because that was a big consideration when we adopted the calendar, was when were teachers coming back to work. So yes, we're repurposing 5 days, which Susan Holt, Dr. Holt back there is glaring at me because we really need those PD days. But in this situation, banking those 5 days could be valuable.
And then those 5 days, the teachers we put at the end.
If we do not need to use them, yes. If they do not, we could bank those and put them at the end.
If we don't use them, then we would have to have a flexible graduation date, in that if we used them, graduation would be, say, May 28th, but if we don't, graduation would be May 23rd, and then we have 5 days of teacher professional development.
Well, those teacher days wouldn't change the 187 days.
Right, because they'd still be working 187 days.
But you could cut off 5 days at the end for students. You could. That's possible. And then we could use those days for PD days. So yes, you could still rebank the PD days. They'd just be at the end where we were really hoping to get them at the beginning. But that's a quick, a little less painful way to add 5 days. Like Dr. Kane always says, everything has warts on it. We just got to figure out which warts that we can live with of these different options. Okay, so then you move on to option C. This is an option we've seen several districts around the area looking at closely. You can start adding some additional minutes every day to your schedule. And so I just gave you some ideas there. If we added 15 minutes, and you take the 1,600 that's already in the calendar, add 15 minutes a day, and you can get about 9.3 additional days, all the way up to the option of 30 minutes. We've heard some districts adding 40 minutes to their current schedule. This starts getting into a few issues. Our non-exempt staff members and how many hours that they can work. And our non-exempt staff members do a great job coming in and covering morning duty, student arrival, dismissal times, and we'd really have to rethink if we want to add 15 minutes, if you go 20 or 30, what does that day look like? How do we cover those students, making sure everyone is safe? If we have to stagger start times and all of that, there's lots of little things that we would need to work there, but you can bank quite a few minutes, quite a few days that would help us through a shutdown by just adding some minutes every day. We can add it at the beginning, at the end. Elementary parents might kind of cringe at that, adding 15 to the beginning, so we might want to split and add 8 on each end or something. There's lots of different options within there. Option D, if you kind of take a little bit of A, B, and C up there and add them together, we can get a higher number of banked days. We can get the 1,600 surplus from keeping our current calendar in place. And then if we repurpose the 5 days, gets us the 2,250. And then if we add 15 minutes to every day, then we can get up even higher. You'll see I split that, the two 15-minute adds, because the 15-minute add to the original calendar is 2,595, but if you put 5 days at the beginning, add 15 minutes to those, that gives you 75 more minutes for that total of 6,540, which is about 14 and a half banked days. So that would give us probably the most of all these options as far as banking minutes. Okay, moving on then to another option, they just keep coming. We can add contingency days for teachers and students as needed in June. So you would say you got to be flexible, 10 to 15 days, how many days we have to shut down, we tack on to the end of June. That proposes a couple issues. Parents, families planning, staff, family planning for vacations, and they wouldn't be able to plan during the month of June because we may or may not have to add some days in there. Another concern I have, and I know Dr. Holt would probably share this concern, is the curriculum needs at that point in June. The testing is not changing. The testing is in April and May, and we're always just trying to hold on through the end of May with our kids, those 2 weeks of instruction. We would be talking about adding 3, 4, 5 weeks of instruction to the end. And we've already tested. It's difficult to hold on. What would our attendance look like in June if we asked students to come back? And how would that impact us financially if we went with that option? Like I said, they all have warts. Option F is to repurpose the 5 PD days in August that we've already talked about, and then wait and see how first semester goes. And if we find out that we had a shutdown, we can start adding minutes second semester. We heard of a neighboring district that is looking and considering this option, that you may have to add more minutes. You may have to go to that 40-minute max in the second semester in order to get enough days to recoup the $75,600. So that's kind of a little bit proactive, bank 5, and then a wait and see approach. Option G is the intersessional calendar that Dr. Averett presented. He gave you a great visual of what that would look like. One of the concerns with that is, once again, families planning for travel. Because if you get off of that calendar a little bit and you've got to take a break earlier than you planned for, then that family may have planned a vacation during that break time originally, and now they would have to reschedule that. So a little bit concerning, but it does give you a lot of flexibility. Option H, we can explore a year-round calendar model. And then option I is the one that Dr. Averett and Mr. Calden spoke about, is the 180 days plus the additional school day for elementary and the funding there. So can I answer any specific questions over options?
But there's also some other questions that I do not have the answer to, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. Do you think that, I mean, now what they're allowing us for summer is to only have 11 people in a classroom, that's students and adults, and they're planning that for June. Do you believe that in August they're going to let us put 60 kids on a bus? Do you believe that in August, when our kids come, they're going to say it's okay to have 22 kids in a classroom at the elementary and 28 at the middle level? Because if the governor comes out with, I'm sorry, we still want to have social distancing and you've got to have 6 feet between each child. Wildman, their lunch will start at, I think Mr. Autry said, at 7 in the morning, and will end at 3 in the afternoon. So are we going to be asked to have split days at every level? Like I said, there is no answer. Don't be waiting for an answer. Okay, I do not have the answer. For certain things, we are at the mercy of the governor and his executive orders under the safety guidelines. So those things are just something to worry about on top of the calendar issue that our 3 cabinet members presented. Because if the governor says you're shutting down, as you know, we shut down. If the governor says you can't have more than 11 bodies in a room at a time, do we look at kids go every other day? Do we look at expanding the school day to half day? What do we do about lunch? How long of a day would that be? What do we leave out? I mean, all of those are unanswered questions on top of these calendar options. I know that's not good news.
I personally would like to hear from these guys.
I have a question. Do we know yet how many days the governor or the commissioner is going to mandate that we add into our calendar? Because like we know, a regular calendar now, we have to add in 2 snow days. So are we going to add in 20 or 30? How many are we going to be mandated?
It's my understanding right now that the commissioner is silent. I'm not saying he said no, but that he is saying if you want your regular calendar to stand, the requirement is to have 2 bad weather days. If that's allowed for the districts, and there are several districts, it's my understanding, Camel and Ennis and Huntsville. I mean, there are some districts who've already come out there and said, we're not changing our calendar, period. Decision's been made by the board, we're not changing the calendar, okay? That's very, very risky, because if they get shut down, they've got to start deciding, are we going to take up previously announced days off for students? Are we going to go on Saturdays? We're going to go in June. So I'm assuming there's going to be a backup plan, but there's nothing in the bank. So, Ms. Kriegel, I'd love to answer your question. I'd love for my questions of, are you going to allow 22 kids in a classroom? Dr. Averett, the commissioner, just as I had to get off the commissioner call, he was talking about if we had certain calendars, there may be a rolling dates for both the December, that would go through December for testing and through June if you are online. Now, if you do paper, so again, they keep adding options. I mean, that was like, what, 3 hours ago? Mm-hmm. They keep adding options that may or may not help based on what decision we make now or in a month about our calendar. But yes, no principals, questions or concerns or comments, worries, suggestions, or better yet, solutions. Oh, thank you, Ms. Authier.
Will you step up to the microphone, because we have several people online that are following us. I want to make sure that they can hear everything that's been said.
And just to introduce...
You be next, Ms. Foster, don't worry.
Ms. Authier,
Yes,
Ms. Authier is our principal of our wonderful Wildman STEAM Academy. Ms. Authier.
In looking at the different options that Ms. Mock presented, I would be more for adding minutes to the school day and possibly repurposing those 5 PD days. At this point, I think, summer school for me, or not adding the days in the summer right now, I wouldn't necessarily be in favor of that. I think that after everything that we've been through, I think that parents, students, everyone, needs to.
Well, now, this wouldn't be anything this summer.
Yes.
That would be 21.
But even for next summer, I feel like I like the the other options with like the intersessional and the year round. But I feel like for this coming school year, because we've already had the calendar, just adding the days, adding the minutes to the calendar, repurposing those 5 days. I think that for me, in looking at that, and I want to go back and talk to my staff, talk to my parents, and get their opinion. But that's more appealing to me, I think, than the other ones right now.
Well, Ms. Authier, I couldn't agree with you more that our staff is worn out. This 3 months has absolutely worn out our staff. They worked so hard to make that transition, and they have been on the phone with parents, and I agree.
Yeah. But I think that'd be the easiest way to change the upcoming school year that would be the least disruptive to what's already been planned. And then I think looking forward to the next year, then looking at some of those other calendar options, I think would be good. That's just my opinion.
Ms. Foster?
I'm really loud.
Ms. Foster is our principal of wonderful Northside Elementary. She's in her 2nd year at Northside, and she's going to have pre-K next year.
Oh yeah, I can't wait to be back with pre-K. Okay, so one of my questions was for the extra summer days calendar. So for the 30 extra days, does that look like having all students?
It's my understanding we would ask. It would be by request. I don't think you can have the whole school.
Okay.
It's my understanding there will be a certain number of teachers they will pay for. You get to choose which students you ask first. Is that your understanding, Mr. Calden?
I know enough about it to be dangerous and not accurate. My initial gut is right now we have the mandatory summer school for those in certain grade levels. This would be on top of that. So this would be kind of open to just about anybody pre-K through 5 that wanted to come. The funding component would only be for half days. So we could have, pre-K through 12 having additional 30 days in the next summer's calendar.
21.
But we would only be coding pre-K through 5 for that funding purpose, and then half of that would actually count for funding. So
essentially, no students would have to make up the days except for the students that we felt like needed that 30 days?
I'm almost as dangerous as he is in the lack of knowledge. It would be, here's some summer school opportunities. They're going to pay K through 3 or K through 5?
Pre-K through 5.
Pre-K through 5. They're going to pay partially for you to pay your teachers to have a certain number of kids that you would choose who need to be there. It's my understanding today.
No.
And then there wouldn't be days to make up with that.
And the teachers would be
It
paid
would not
extra.
be. But one thing to keep in mind with that, right now we have about 172, 173 days in next year's calendar. To get that funding, we would have to go an extra 37 days because you have to have 180 and the 75,600. So even if we add extra minutes, even if we go 15 extra minutes, repurpose the PD days, if we keep the 173 days in the calendar, we can go 100,000 minutes. But until we hit 180 days of instruction and 75,600, those extra 30 days we're not incurring that extra allotment.
So you would be balancing the morale, the extra time, all of those to how many kids do we think we would get there and we would get paying part. So that would be kind of another decision on, it's kind of like, is the view worth the climb?
Gotcha. I think that's it. That's my
Great questions.
so far.
Other principals or directors? Mr. Morgan, yeah, I know you got band and choir and art and charmers and.
Here, while he's walking up there, has anybody got feedback from their staff that says we absolutely don't want to repurpose those 5 land development days? They said, we don't want that. I mean, I know you do that.
So since this is relatively new information that we've just gotten, I haven't gotten much staff feedback except for a couple of folks who I work with pretty much on a daily basis because they are very concerned about UIL, TMEA, those events that are taking place in the fall. As far as like right now, I don't know that I could give you my official, my recommendation or my opinion on it, but I would say that as I said earlier in feedback online too, whatever's best for the students. And from my perspective, which is a very biased perspective because you have me here for fine arts, I would say whatever's more consistent, provided UIL allows us and TMEA allows us and all the other various competitions, they allow us to be able to perform. Because I know some of those calendars, as you can probably see, and most of you do follow our band and our choir and theater and dance programs and art, we have very sparse competitions that happen at very specific times in the year. So if we pick a schedule that has alternate like breakouts like the intermittent, it could have lots of wonderful academic results, but it could stop school and practices for us in very critical parts of the year, which I'm not going to use a word like devastating, but it could be significant to, impacting our students, whether that be right before one-act play or prior to marching band, right before concert and sight reading. So I'm all for consistency if we can get away with it, but I'm also not naive to the fact that if we don't build in something that we could be putting ourselves in harm's way, but in terms of that. But from a fine arts perspective, I would say that anything that keeps us as consistent as possible would be good, but I don't think that we're in opposition to adding anything to be able to help us. But we need to really look at the UIL, what they're going to allow us to do. Like you said, Dr. Kane, if we're only allowed to keep 10 kids in a classroom, that's going to really complicate every fine art program and ensemble we have. So.
Mr. Benniger, I know that you have a lot of certification testing and times. How does this affect your programming?
I think the biggest impact for us is going to be in health science program area. So we've got 600 students between the 2 campuses that are in health sciences that now some of the clinics are saying we can't let kids come in and do these things. And so for our kids to get certified in those areas, if they're not getting in there and they're getting clinical minute and time with the doctors and the nurses, they can't do these things. Some of these program areas, we can't certify our kids unless our teachers see the kids do something. So with welding, I can't have a kid sit behind a computer that doesn't have the equipment, that doesn't have the internet to show their teacher that they know how to weld something. So unless the kids can be in front of the teachers to see some of these things, it's impossible for some of these programs to do this. We've worked out some programs where they can do things virtually and the teacher can watch something, but it still has to be proctored. And so the kid has to have a camera with a microphone and it has to be recording the whole time to watch the kid take an exam. So we've had some variances there, but for a lot of it, our teachers need to see these kids. So it's CTE, the kids want to come to school for a lot of these programs. They like their math and their science and English and all that. They love the programs that come to school for CTE, and it gets kids prepared for careers. So if we can't certify these kids, we're sending them out with something that, they can't go out and do what they want to do, what they're passionate about. So that's the biggest thing that I've heard from a lot of our teachers.
More fallout. Thank you. Okay, principals, I know some of your teachers have been calling.
I have asked two teachers today, and they said, let's just leave it alone,
Okay. Okay, and here's the risk to that, because that's an option too. For those of you who may not have heard Ms. Foster, she had an incidental report, 2 teachers who said leave the calendar alone. That is an option, but what we would ask then is for us to say, okay, if we choose to do that, and that's a choice, that's a legitimate choice, we would say, but what if we get closed, we need teachers to vote on what goes first. If it down to 30 days, okay? In what order would we either give up break or come on a Saturday or cut out something else or come in June? So that would be the requirement if the general feeling is we would like to leave the calendar alone. That would be the ask, is to come up with, hope you're right, but if you're not right, let's go ahead and say ahead of time, here's how we're going to use the day so you won't be planning. So several districts are doing that, so we wouldn't be the only one. So anybody else? Mr. Cavazos, Mr. Zant, Mr. Lynch.
Dr. Kane, I would add just a couple of things. One thing is, with the starting a little bit earlier, we need to be mindful that Simpson is not done, and that will be finishing this summer. So the earlier we start, if we repurpose those 5 PD days, we may be putting that Simpson staff in a bit of a crunch to get the campus decorated and ready for instruction. Yes, ma'am.
Could you text Mr. Craig real quickly and just ask him?
I can't. I'm phoneless.
Okay, well, could either Mr.
Oh, thanks.
Oh, no. If you, just kind of get an idea.
Last time he and I talked, we were looking at first part of July, but again.
Yeah, no, that'd be nice, but sometimes first part of July turns into the 5th of August.
The only other thing that I would add to it is, again, on those early days, I like running the air conditioner in February and March, not so much the first part of August. It's a whole lot more expensive, but whatever is best for kids, we will do.
Mr. Lynch, from our wonderful global high school.
Yeah, thank you. I've always been a proponent for year-round school, so I naturally like the extended break idea, but I know that won't be the most favorite. I'm convinced everybody would like to keep the calendar just like it is if that option was really there. I think we need we probably need a lot of plans. But one thing that I haven't heard anybody say that I think might be helpful if we can only put a limited number of students in a class is, instead of opening the schools up for 7.5 hours a day, we do a morning plan and an afternoon plan, so we extend the hours that our schools open so we can, maybe address that a little better just for that reason.
Well, and not at your level, certainly, but at the elementary level, that would give parents a huge problem for child care. Not discounting your program, but that is the first thing I think of when I think of us either doing a half-day program or you come on Tuesday, you come on Wednesday, you come on Thursday, y'all come on Friday, you come back on Monday. That would be...
Well, I'm not a fan of, some students come on Tuesday and Thursday and some come on Monday and Wednesday. That's a disaster, and I
But how would our teacher... Right now, what hours do your teachers work?
Well, pretty much 7:45 to 4:15.
Okay, so if we had a split day, what do you think the hours would be? Because we would have to cut down on many classes, but at the same time, that transition time.
Well, we'd have to start a little sooner so that we could have a break in, around 3 o'clock to usher in the second half. But,
So what hours would our teachers be working?
Well, you'd have class probably start at 7, get out at 3, and the next group would start at 4, or maybe run till, 11, something like that. But you know, at the high school level, our kids are up till 11 or 12 o'clock all the time. Now, at the elementary, we just rearranged. We'd have to look at minutes for each student. But, you know, it would just be another option for potentially opening that up. You know, if you only have 11 and you have to close down, like I heard Dr. Hinojosa say, you know, we're going to shut down the junior highs and the high schools. We're going to do those online so that we can open up the schools to the elementary. You know, this being online has been a super challenge.
Yes. Yes.
And I'm not convinced that they're getting anywhere close to the education that they need.
I'm convinced they're not. We cannot seem to get that. Not just us. Every superintendent I've talked to is concerned about the rigor. I don't care how hard our teachers work, how much they planned. The teachers also are worried about the rigor of the program. They need to be sitting in front of their kids.
And I like our new program with Apex that we're using, but I have students doing Apex and remediation who barely pass the class in class and are making 90s in their remediation class. So, you know, the rigor's not there. They're just not going to be ready coming into next year. So whatever we decide, we need students somewhere in the classroom with a teacher.
Thank you. I couldn't agree with you more.
All right, thank you.
No, thank you for presenting.
Mr. Lynch, you might be able to answer this. When does the summer 2 semester end at Barrow and Sac? And if we started a little early, if that was going to affect any of those kids?
The colleges typically start after we do and then end before we do. So
like the summer semester, the summer 2 semester, when is that normally end?
Well, summer 2 runs into our schedule. So if we start in August, we'll have kids who are trapped in the middle. So there'll be some there and some here.
Yeah, that'd be something good to find out before we pick out a name.
I just looked at Barrow's website, and it looks like the last day of summer 2 is August 12th, which would be
Squeaky.
use those 5 days to do the day that our
Yeah, it'd be high. Okay, you got 10 minutes to get over here to the school, yeah.
We run into that every year with students who take that second semester. We always have a day or two of overlap, so we have to just kind of work that in. But, you know, on a typical year, those first couple of days, you don't necessarily miss that much, you know, so the students can run over there and take their finals and so forth. But if we start early in August, it'll be an issue. But they are taking their classes online, so at least through Navarro.
Thank you, Mr. Lynch. Other principals?
I'm going to ask Ms. Bridges to come up and talk about the online survey that we've had.
We actually put the survey online thinking after this meeting, people would access the survey. So Ms. Bridges came in my office about 2 minutes before the board meeting and said.
Yes, our staff and our community was very eager. I'm sorry.
Board, that's what I put on in front of your chairs or handed it to you before the meeting started. So you'll have the majority of the data that she's talking about. Go ahead, Ms. Bridges.
So they were very eager to respond with their thoughts on our calendar. We sent out the Google survey yesterday morning, and we now have more than 1,450 responses. At this point, 57.5% of those respondents would like to build in additional time throughout the year to accommodate potential periods of closure. Now, what we didn't do is provide a lot of detail about what building in that extra time would look like. So this is just a very general response. These folks want to build in extra time. 607 people who responded did provide additional information in our comment box, and they had some very good suggestions and thoughts. So I kind of gave you an amalgam of what the most common themes were. There are people who think that we should open with a normal schedule, people who would like us to move to a year-round calendar, build in extra minutes each day. So really everything that we have talked about today, our community members are also thinking. I do want to emphasize that one theme that was very common is that parents are concerned about having to find childcare. Should we move to a hybrid model or a half-day model, particularly for those elementary kids? So, and I'm sorry that this is not more detailed, but if you have questions, I can print out the whole thing for you.
So I think we just kind of informally talked about Ms. Bridges kind of refining and narrowing each time, like dividing staff from parents. And but maybe the hybrid model, here's my concern with the hybrid model. When our teachers teach face-to-face, it is an all-day thing, they plan all week, and it's a full day. Okay. The distance learning is the same thing, only typically they start earlier because we have parents who call early because they go to work early, or later. It's even a longer day. It's a very different planning day. The hybrid model would be expect like you're the teacher and like you've got 22 kids. These 4 want to do the hybrid model, which means some days they're home and some days they come to school, which would mean the expectation is our teachers would plan everything for our face-to-face and modify it for traditional, and I do not see how we can ask our teachers to do that.
I think that is a lot. I have seen personally how hard my daughter's teachers have worked throughout this. It's a lot.
So
to try to
I'm
engage
extremely concerned about the hybrid model and also with the daycare, because our teachers have worked so hard, whether they're in the class or if they are doing the distance learning. They are 2 totally different sets of lesson plans and presentation, and there just really isn't time to do that. So those are just my concerns to the board about the hybrid model. Although on paper, it sounds great. If it were that easy to go, okay, y'all are staying home, fine, here's your stuff, that would work. It's just that's not how it works when you're preparing a lesson and you're trying to teach distance.
Well, and I think a lot of us too have gotten to see it both from the parent perspective and the school district employee perspective. And it's tough to homeschool a kiddo when you're also working full time.
Well, and I understand, I think the parents actually want to do that just in case there's kind of a little outbreak or something they're worried about. They want the ability to do that. And I understand that, and I appreciate that. But the reality of the situation is when you're looking at our teaching structure and our teaching time, that's, I'm not saying it's out of the realm of possibility, but it's close.
It's also important to consider that to do distance learning, we checked out more than 2,500 devices to kids.
So getting them back and then how many
getting
do you
them back
deploy?
out if we did a hybrid model or we, it
it's
would
like,
be tough.
I'd like to do the hybrid model. I do not have a device and I do not have a hotspot. Well, we can't have a bus sitting outside. So, yes, thank you.
There are a lot of things to
That's
think
an
about.
additional consideration.
Well, right. So Mr. Calden makes a really good point that if we have kids take the devices home, then there aren't any left at school. So, I mean, it's there are lots and lots of things to consider, which I know you all already know. So, but I do, I would like to send out, after the discussion this evening, send out tomorrow a more detailed survey that gives people more choices as far as building time into the calendar. Do they want us to start early? Do they want us to build in extra minutes? Just so we can really drill down and get more information.
I think one thing that is, and correct me if you're wrong, the given so far is, we said we weren't going to start school before what day, Ms. Mott? August 10th? Okay, that we're kind of, sort of, committing that principals, teachers, parents, before August 10th is not okay. So at least we've narrowed it down to that point, that August 10th is the beginning of something, may not know what it is, but no one wants to go earlier than August 10th. Everybody's got everything planned up to August 10th. So that's what I heard. Y'all kind of hearing the same thing? Okay, so let's just kind of sort of say that's a non-starter.
And I think that we need to make sure that we're reassuring our staff that, we will work with them to give them time to
Oh.
get their rooms ready and things like that. I mean,
Bless their
I
hearts.
can feel the collective tension among our sweet teachers at the thought of only having a couple days to get their rooms ready.
One thing that's really known, K-12 for kids, is that closure at the end of the year, and that's not happening like it should. That's, our kids are hurting, our teachers are hurting. It's been a long spring.
It has.
Mr. Calden, have you ever to contact
I have
Mr.?
an update from Mr. Craig. Optimistically, we are looking at the first week of June. So the realist in me would say mid-June that we're done with construction. Then you're looking at least 2, probably 3 weeks for furniture installation, and the July 4th week will be in there as well. You're realistically looking mid-July before that building is ready for people to move in.
Okay, so the last building we opened,
Yes, ma'am.
from the time we said your furniture's there, your stuff's in boxes in the cafeteria, we just brought it over for your campus, what is a reasonable expectation
For getting everything moved in,
for the teachers going, I'm ready? Well,
That
was Wildman the last one?
that move-in would have been at the high school. In terms of a new construction, that move-in would have been at the high school, and that would have been realistically the better part of 4 weeks.
4 weeks. Okay, fair enough. Okay, we need to keep that in mind too.
And I believe that year we built in 9 days of time for them to work in their classroom.
Yep, we did.
So that sounds like, let's say August 10th is the start date. That would mean July 15th or something. Okay,
Realistically, you're looking around July 20th.
so it kind of fit.
Has there been any feedback from your staff on adding minutes to the day? No, Ms. Harris?
Actually, and I have staff that are Zooming. My staff's Zooming all and sending me their comments as we're talking.
Live, what we want.
And
That's what we want.
what they kind of like is some balance, and they like the option, and I'm sorry, I'm messing with it. They like the option D, where it looked like it had a little bit more balance in it.
Yeah,
We
let's throw
added
D up
some.
there.
There you go.
Thank you.
Yeah, no.
We added, we came back early instead of having those PD days, and then we added the extra minutes. We had talked a little bit about it this week in my department lead meeting, and as they're Zooming, they were talking about looking through these options. And option D seems to be the most balanced of all of them. It's closest to what we have now. And in addition to that, they spoke about if we are not allowed to come back, or if the governor says, we have to maintain social distancing. If we did say an option D, we could perhaps expand the minutes at the high school level and have more of a college type schedule and stagger our teachers in order to accommodate that type of a need if we had to perhaps educate students in a smaller environment.
Well, and just off the top of my head, don't you think, you editorially, not necessarily you personally, if TEA says you're going to have 2 classes a day somehow, that they would give us a break on the minutes, because they would almost have to say, okay, you don't have to have as many minutes, and so there is no way that we could do 2 full days. So we might get a break there, because
Correct.
just the reality of the situation is we just have so many teachers and so many buses.
Right.
So, so the D is 10 minutes extra a day? 15.
I thought it was 15.
Okay, 15 daily, 15 minutes added daily, okay. So that'd be 7.5 in the morning, 7.5 in the afternoon. Okay. Or, yeah, whatever fits in, okay.
Anybody else heard from their staff? Come on, Ms. Lothier.
Come on, Ms. Lothier.
So I met with my grade level leaders this week about this and just told them that this was coming. So a lot of my staff are watching it right now too. I have a meeting with them scheduled for in the morning that they're going to give me feedback from the rest of the staff on what their thoughts are. And then I'm meeting with some parents next week to give feedback from parents, a parent group from my school. And so I feel like after that I'll have a better idea. I did get several text messages from my teachers that they like B and then C.
B is in boy?
Yes, so the 5 PD days or C, or possibly both. Those are what I'm getting from mine right now. But again, I think once we're all able to talk together and get a good plan or what we think, so.
Okay, make certain you say.
What about come on, junior high guys, we're the only ones we hadn't heard from. Heard from elementary, heard from high school.
Mr. Zant had some free labor up there today.
Yeah,
Free child labor. We ain't gonna look into that.
We have a meeting tomorrow because I wanted to wait till after the board meeting today, and then we're gonna have a CEIC meeting on next Wednesday, and so we'll have more feedback then. I do know that I've had a couple teachers say no to Saturdays. That's no bueno, and then also year-round school. I've heard quite a few comments about year-round school as a no. So, but that's all I've got.
Well, Board, what I've asked is that after tonight, we asked the principals to either watch online or to be at the meeting so that they would know up-to-date information as much as we have, and that we're going to send them this presentation that Mr. Calden and Dr. Averett and Ms. Mott put together so that the principals don't have to put anything together, because it's pretty self-explanatory, and ask them to meet with their CEIC and/or their department leaders and/or grade leaders and/or these are the informal leaders on my campus and/or this is my PTA, that whoever and how many ever meetings, one big one, several small ones, to get as much information back from each campus. And then I'd like the board to look at it as just total number of teachers, parents who would like XYZ, or here's what junior high want, here's what high school want, here's what elementary wants. We're probably going to present it to you in several different ways. I would love to tell you, oh, there's going to be a clear winner and this is going to be, but I don't think that that's probably going to happen because people feel very strongly about it. We're in a sense gambling if we say we're not going to change the calendar at all, which is what would be ideal. But if that's the case, then we have to know we make up time, which we're not going to like doing. If we bank this, the good thing is having that end day, that graduation, we say no graduation invitations. It's either going to be on the 23rd or the 28th, which the teachers would feel like they got some of their time back. And the kids would feel like they got out early, according to, unless there's some like Mr. Vinegar has, that they have to stay and do something, that would still give that flexibility because they wouldn't mind staying 3 extra days to get their certificates or to finish their welding project. That would give some flexibility, but we just can't see the future, and that's the problem with this decision.
I would encourage principals to encourage your staff to participate in this survey, the new one that comes up. The more people we hear from, the better representation we're going to get. Yes, absolutely. I'm actually going to ask all 7 of us to, if they had anything to say, go right ahead.
Okay.
She's also our birthday girl, so.
Yes. Okay, so last week in the commissioner's talk that I listened to, a lot of the people seem to be calling in and saying an option that I kind of see maybe on E, I'm not sure, but about the extending through June. Yeah, any added contingency days is needed in June.
The calendar would be the same.
And I believe that it was like the extended calendar till June,
right.
End of June. But if we don't have to use them,
right.
Then we're on our regular calendar.
Right, this is called the gamblers.
Yeah,
okay.
But it's adding the number of days that during the school year that we're out for COVID, adding it to June. And everybody understands that, and the teachers will not be working during that time.
If they don't need it, they don't work?
Right, exactly. And then also, personally looking at this, maybe we could add in the contingency, I believe it's on B, that we add in those 8.5 contingency days at the beginning. But frankly, having breaks in the fall scares me, because what if we took off, that we do kind of the program where you have the breaks throughout the year, and we take our 2-week break in October, and that's really nice. But in,
you come back the next day.
In the spring, in March or April, we have our COVID, and we need the 2 weeks that we had a really nice break during.
No, that's a big wart.
And, you know, that's my thing. And also, you know, as far as planning and everything, they could plan their vacations for July. And they could know straight out that they may have to go through June. And that's why I asked the question about how many days are we actually going to have to add into the calendar? Because I was really unclear listening to the commissioners talk. I was very clear as to how many days.
That would be a straight up, that we have our regular calendar. If we're out 30 days, we make up 30 days. If we're out one day, we make up one day. If we're out no days, we're out on May 28th.
Right, and we could do the 8.5 that we have here, and then.
That's the savings account plan.
So then 21 and a half, yeah, so then we'd only have to make up 21 and a half.
If we had those in the bank, then that would be minus June, minus 8.5.
Right, exactly. So, I mean, that would be my thought. And listening to the commissioners talk, it seemed to be the way a lot of the states was, I mean, you know, there's, at the end of it, I don't remember if you were listening, but at the end of it, he said, I am, you know, I'm getting messages that people are very interested in, you know, doing the June, and, you know, it seemed like a lot of people were calling it at that time.
I think they kind of got their feelings hurt. I think that they thought everybody was going to jump on the intersessional calendar, that people are ready to go year-round. They're not.
Well, we went that way many years ago with Wallman, the Wallman project. And some people, no, might remember. One person might remember. You know, we
How
did
many
try
years?
That.
How many
It was
years?
between 1 and 3, Ms. Timmer, wasn't it? I was saying, yeah.
Well, did it stop just because of lack of interest?
I was in elementary school at that time, I was in elementary school at that time, and the drawback to year-round that I remember was that not all of our schools were on that same schedule.
Right. And that's
So the people who only had their
Yeah.
kids at Wildman, they loved it because they could take a vacation during an off time. But it was tough with not everyone being on the same schedule.
But anyway, that's my thinking on it so far.
okay.
And also, I have heard back, my feedback from teachers is they do not want any more minutes in the day. They feel like we, you know, extended the minutes last year. We added 30. So, thank you.
I think Mr.
You want to go next, John?
I would just be in favor of not getting too far in one ditch or the other. And, you know, I'm in favor of possibly trying to build the cushion with the 5 PD days and seeing what happens at that point. And if you want to add the 7 and 7 beginning and end to build a little bit more, I guess my question would be, if those PD days are important, what would be the downside to making them student days?
I'd like to, Dr. Holt, do you want to answer that, or you want me to answer that? Okay.
That is a good point. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, I texted you. No, I did not. So on the professional development days, it's always critical because you're onboarding new implementations. This year specifically, we're onboarding a new assessment piece with MAP, so that's going to be all content areas and it'll be expanded through multiple grade levels. We're also looking at a learning management system. Not that you can't offer alternative ways, and we're already beginning to try to wrap our minds around that. However, we don't have flex time, and that would be impossible to try to incorporate in one of these massive change calendars as well. So that would probably mean attempting to pull teachers out of classrooms and try to pay stipends. So there's a fiscal increase on that too, because we still need to support by professional learning. We saw that in distance learning. Teachers are doing a tremendous job, but districts across the state realized that we really weren't prepared, and nor were we able to give any professional development for distance learning to staff as they tried to implement this. There was no time, it was too hasty, and there are a lot of ways that now the state and regional service centers are coming out with things that would enrich and have a higher rate of engagement, so that we wouldn't be, we've had anywhere from 50 or 30% to 90% participation, depending on the classes and teachers. So it's very skewed, and that's across the state, and it's been dropping the last few weeks. So what was high is now the attendance is poor there. So there's pieces of the reasons for PD and why it's important, but I also see the validation of using those times. We just need to figure out a way for that to be flexible, and maybe that means that within the school day, we have to do PLCs, and maybe there will be some afternoons, but when you extend the school day, then you run into another problem yet. You run into teachers not only staying late for student capacity, but then they also would be expected or maybe feel like they needed to get some professional development, stay later. It also changes pedagogy in homework. If we go late, then our pedagogy has to change a little bit because students won't have as much time in the afternoon to do homework. So there's a lot of things around this. I would like to say before I leave, not just on the PD, but all of these decisions, and we don't want to, and I don't want anybody to make hasty decisions, but we need to be wrapping our heads around this quickly, because every one of these calendars, except for staying with the one that we vetted, requires a different pacing. Every one of them. And so the curriculum, although we use TRS, the Teach Resource Service, through Region 10, they're not going to repace for every district's possible calendar. So that means we will have to internally pace. With the testing not changing or the window not changing possibly, or maybe just being expanded. And again, if right now they're saying only if we do online, well, if we end up having to do a hybrid, if we have to, because of the 22 rule, and so we have all of our computers distributed out, how are we going to regather those and test? So then we won't even make that window that the state is saying that you can open your window if you do online, because we won't be able to online. We're going to be constantly shuffling devices. So not hasty, but quickly, so that we can wrap our heads around it. We only have like 15 more days of staff even here to do those things.
I would like to, I don't know if it's possible, and I haven't really talked to President Autry about it, but my goal was to get as much information to the board and possibly make a decision at the June 9th meeting, just for planning purposes for teachers, staff, because I agree with Dr. Holt. Every day we wait after that, we hurt ourselves. It's going to be a hard decision to make. It's going to be unpopular. I don't care what the decision is. But a decision needs to be made, because it's better than to move forward once that decision is made. So I'm asking for June 9th. I don't know if that's possible, but that would be, I'm sorry, June 8th. But that would be the goal. Just for the very reason of planning, and that we may have to restructure so many things. Teachers have already made plans. Teachers have made plans for next summer. All this is impacting them, and we have already just worn them out with the distance learning. So that would be my goal, but might not happen.
Do you have anything else, Mr. Rogers? Ms. Timmerman?
Well, I'm probably like all of you. My brain is like frazzled right now because there's so many choices out there, and everybody that gets up there makes sense. You know,
darn it.
I agree. You know, the teachers need that PD. But I would give them up and hopefully get them back at the end of the year to save on that. Got to think about childcare. You know, you can't interrupt parents. They've been interrupted enough, and my heart goes out to all the parents that have had to stay on the job, teach their kids. It's been a lot, and the teachers too. Right now, I think D looks good. I don't think that very many people want to come back in June. Kids are done in May. I don't know how they do anything in June. So right now I'm D.
D.
D is done.
I'm not saying we don't see what's up there.
You go back, whoever's running the slides, you go back to that.
Yeah, let's put the A, B, C, D. But I do like that slide you threw
that I put
up.
up there is really the things that people are talking about. It's really a list of things to consider when you're looking at a calendar. So things like pacing, things about child, parent needs, student recruitment and attendance, operations. We talked about the light bill is going to be, we're going to have.
And everybody's master schedules done.
Anyway, yeah.
Ms. Starnader?
Well, one observation I had, I guess if you want to find something positive, there's nothing really positive, but anyway, isn't it funny that I thought when we went to minutes from days, that was so strange, but I guess now it's kind of good that we did go to minutes because you have that, that flexibility. I really don't have a preference. I mean, it's whatever the, community and staff decides, I'm going to support. I do worry about the child care issue. I mean, if we look at the demographics of our school district, I mean, we really need to pay attention to that. And then I guess the frustration for me is testing. I mean, really? The testing calendar? I mean, if something happens, I mean, come on, TEA is going to have to come through for us.
They say they did that this year, and that's it. Now, if they have to shut us down too many days, if things change, I think they'll be reasonable.
Surely, yeah.
But they're standing firm on days and testing. But again, I was kind of surprised whenever they gave in on testing this year as early as they did. But I agree with you.
Yeah. That's all I got.
Mr. McCutcheon?
Yeah, I've got a few things. First was just saying thank you for the presentation, all those who prepared that, and everybody in the room that gave us their feedback. Tonight's actually the first night I've ever had the live stream pulled up on my phone, and you can see how many people are on there. And so I want to thank them for their comments. There's a lot of them.
Kind of generally, what are you getting?
It's a mixed bag. It really is. There's about 250 people on right now. But as far as a preference for me, I don't have one, and I shouldn't. I don't have to live that calendar. You guys do. And so I'm going to wait till we get all the feedback from staff before we make a decision, and that's the way I've always approached the calendar. It's not mine, it's y'all's. I'd like to get the presentation too, if y'all will send it to us.
In fact, if you'll send it to every board member, that's a good, thank you, Mr. McCutcheon. If you'll send that to every board member as well as every principal, when you get questions, you can pull up.
And the last thing I had, and this may be not for this meeting, but it came to mind, so I thought I'd mention it. If we do have a disruption in the school year, I know sometimes getting bus drivers and subs can be difficult because some of those are in the more risky categories as far as this whole virus goes. So that may be another meeting, but it just came to mind, so we might want to keep an eye on, how many
subs?
Yeah.
Classroom subs.
And teachers, they may have to leave to help their kids or whatnot, so we might need to ramp that up a little bit. I don't know. That's it.
Mr. Schofield?
I have multiple levels of concern.
About everything.
One, I don't know what calendar to use yet. I'm not going to, those of you that in here know me and been in meetings, I don't beat around the bush much. I don't know. Let's study it and figure it out and see what works best for people. Two, the testing deal really bothers me as a former teacher. I hate testing. I hate standardized tests anyway. You can put this on the news if you want and tell them I said that. I don't really care because it's a very lucrative industry that I think robs a lot of money out of our communities and doesn't address children very well. Y'all like that? But I do think you do have to have accountability, though, and where does the accountability fall? So there's a fine line there that I've always wondered where it is. But I think the other thing, as y'all saw me get out of the room twice, I was trying to make sure that I could use some information here from my wife and not get in trouble. As many of you know, she works for a local university. They're changing their schedules too, and that was some of the texts that I was just getting. Their schedules are going to change, which is going to affect our high school kids that are doing dual credit stuff, at Global and WHS. Most of them look like are going to start in early August from what she's sending me and going to be done in Thanksgiving. No fall breaks, no anything. So then how do we build our calendar in that will make sure that we don't take our dual credit kids and throw them in a bind? I don't know. There's a lot of moving parts. I don't know. I think we're just going to have to study it and look at it, but we do need to figure out something quickly. And also from being a teacher before for 9 years and having new curriculum thrown at me, is it fair for us to evaluate our teachers when they don't get a chance to wrap their mind around what they're doing at the end of the year. You go, oh, your scores went down. Well, no kidding. I bet they did. You know, I mean, it's not rocket science. So just trying to figure out how to make it all work. I don't know. I don't have an opinion yet, but we're going to have to do something. But I'm kind of like John, try to kind of stay in the middle and figure it out, because I think a lot of it is going to be dictated for us as to what happens. I mean, if nothing bad happens, you're just going to rock right along and it's going to be done. If something bad happens and we have an outbreak like they had this year, it's probably going to change whatever you try to do anyway.
Well, I'll kind of conclude this. I had got a message from one of my colleagues here. At our meeting, when we do approve the changes on the calendar, may try to want to set this up as like a public hearing to where we can hear from anyone and everyone throughout the whole process, right up until we take a vote on what we're going to approve. Our technology guys may pass out when I say this. I know we can't have 150 people in this building, but if we have the opportunity to set up to where they can call in, I know the city has that option through their technology. If there's any way that we can hear live feedback during this meeting from different people when we vote on in June, I'd like to explore that, because in my opinion on this, we can't hear from enough people. And I want to also encourage the principals, get your staff to participate in this survey. Send us emails, whatever. We can't get enough information on making this decision.
President Autry, you know, when we did the rezoning, they would write longer letters to Ms. Bridges, and we made a notebook for you. So what we could do is encourage that too, because some people don't like the public speaking. Some people may not can be there that night. If we encourage them, if you can't be there, because we got that notebook to you guys about a week ahead of time, enough time that not as much as I think you would have liked, but we wanted to try to gather as much input as possible. So Ms. Bridges, if you would, in addition to your survey, say, you can do the survey and write a letter, or you can just write a letter and just do the survey. But that everything that is sent, the surveys would be compiled for the board rather than looking page after page after page. But comments would be taken out in toto and set aside for the board members. And we'll give it to them a week ahead of time.
Anything else from anyone?
No, I think it worked good tonight. Maybe just encourage it verbally, how it happened tonight, with staff communicating with their principal or their leader, and then them relaying on their sentiments to us, rather than maybe have 50 people call in.
The parents as well. However,
anybody, yeah. Every parent has a principal.
And they have our communications office. And we would like to hear from both. We'd like it compiled into the campus to get a sense of what the campus overall wants, but are actually respecting that individual. Here's my concerns. Here's my situation. Here's what my child care situation is. And if you do this, this is what it means to my family.
Anyone else?
This will be sent to us.
I think Ms. Bridges, I think Mr. Collins already sent the presentation to the board and to the principals. Mr. President, since Ms. Bridges kind of surprised us with so many high numbers, what if we ask her every week to kind of just stop and send us and post online also, and send to the board, because I don't want at the end of the day you getting this much stuff. If you kind of get a sense as we go along, or if the principals, as you give input, if we can go ahead and pass that out to the board. Usually I wait to summarize things for you, but I think this is so important and so critical to our success next year. This is the basis, and will set the tone for the entire school year.
Fair enough.
Okay?
Okay. No one has any other comments, I'll entertain them.
Ms.
Sorry,
Bridges.
Ms. Bridges.
Real fast.
No problem.
My attorney said that maybe we should set a deadline for all of that feedback on the survey to come in.
Okay.
My suggestion would be June 1st, which is a week before.
Well, is the board comfortable with my request to make the decision on June? I mean, I just said that because June 8th, there may be a special meeting or two, or do you want to say June 8th and then you may say, I need another week?
I'm gonna say the sooner the better, unless something just crazy comes
Yeah,
up. would
I
say
don't
June
think
8th
we're
is
going to,
fine.
now, if the governor says, I'm going to make another announcement on June 10th, then I'm going to suggest that we have a meeting on June 11th. We have got to hear from him on, are we going to be able to put 60 kids on a bus, and can we put 28 kids in? If I had those two answers, I could make a recommendation almost. Yeah.
So, Board, what I'll do is, as we get responses in, I will just send you all a daily update so that you can keep up with those responses.
Okay.
On that Google survey, it's really easy to just download, and I can just cut out what we've gotten that day and send it over to you. So,
And kind of do an extra plea to parents and say, the board would like to not just participate in the survey, tell us.
Yes, ma'am.
Just principals, track your staff down if they don't give you feedback. Make them give you feedback.
So I'll touch base with you in the morning about what we want that survey and email to look like, and parents and staff members can expect to receive that sometime tomorrow.
And we have one more, next week's going to be the last week we do the staff update and the parent update. We will send out our plea then too.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
We'll offer them multiple times to see that link.
Anything?
One thing,
Go ahead, Ms.
Vera
Harris.
College just contacted me, and they are not changing their schedule. Their start date for our dual credit will be August the 24th, and the end date is December the 11th for fall semester. They are not changing that.
That's a decision. That's not what we're hoping. I mean, they're saying, we've decided.
Yes, ma'am. That is their calendar, and they're sticking to it.
Okay. See, that helps.
Okay. Anything else?
Thank you, board.
Need a motion to adjourn, please. Motion by Mr.
Second.
Schofield. Second by Mrs. Starnetti. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, say nay. Motion carries 7-0. Thank you, guys, everybody.
Oh, yeah, there to be enough. Okay, you sure? You don't want to start?
Well, yeah, except that when we're going to keep it open.